is no exaggeration when I say that the first film, Into the Spider-Verse, was a revolutionary game changer. No mainstream animated feature at the time pushed the boundaries of what the medium could do, both in its visuals and storytelling, as much as Miles Morales and his journey of becoming the Spider-Man of his universe. Not only did it immediately receive praise as one of the greatest animated achievements in recent years, along with being one of the best superhero films ever, but it opened the doors to a new chapter in the medium's history. On top of helping the company behind it, Sony Pictures Animation, to going from a low-tier studio who never released an actual good film since Surf's Up, to one of the most creatively admired teams with an impressive quality standard, but its influence has so far left a positive impact across the industry. When other studios get inspired and want to try their hands on a similar stylistic approach, the results turned out to be very beneficial and even assisted them to improve their craft.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Jonathan Battle Reviews. After their last film they distributed, Paws of Fury: The Legend of Hank, along with noticing this year's financial failure of Pixar's Elemental, it's confirmed that Paramount will no longer be releasing any more original animated films and will focus on making movies focusing on their most popular IPs, such as with SpongeBob, Sonic the Hedgehog, and another franchise with a movie that I'll be discussing. But first, a little experience and history of what I know of the 1987 animated television series Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, I knew nothing of the show, like either watch any of the animated series, but I do know this about their movies, and for over 30 decades they've had a rocky road when releasing them on the big screen. Like in the 1990 decade, there was a trilogy of live action with animatronic turtles built by Jim Henson's Creature Shop. And after acquiring them by Nickelodeon in the 2010 decade, there are two live action versions of that franchise by the infamous Transformers director Michael Bay. Looking at those, they're not a good reputation of them when it comes to making animated films, especially live action ones based on cartoons. But then there's this one that might change the franchise for the better, and that is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. Now, this isn't the first time a computer animated film of the turtles who love pizza and learn martial arts would be released. That would go back to a 2007 film released by Warner Brothers, animated by the short-lived Imagi Studios. But what makes this film stand out specifically is that it is produced by comedian Seth Rogen, and beforehand he had quite an experience when working on animated films besides voice acting, like in Monsters vs. Aliens or the Kung Fu Panda franchise, like those ones, like his time at DreamWorks Animation. But in 2016, he released Sausage Party, which reignited more adult-oriented animated films for the near future. But now, when talking about this film, what do I think of it? Well, I'll tell you about it because it might be one this year's biggest anime surprises since last year's Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. So, let's dive in. Mutant Mayhem tells the origin story of these pizza-loving martial arts turtles and how they want to be accepted in society after being living in underground sewers with their rat father and learn to learn what it takes to be heroes despite their appearances. This is more of a coming of age aspect that it might feel similar to another animated film like Sony's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but luckily there's a unique spin to this story, and that would be its crime twist. The way it delivers had really excellent pacing, where many scenes like Rogan Promise doesn't feel like boring for the most part. Although there are a bit of predictabilities like some minor cliches like the Larry Village show, but that's just my nitpick. But its execution on the story, it really makes the action scenes intense, which will be brought up later. But what I admired the most is its gritty tone or atmosphere. And what I mean by that is how, while this is set in Brooklyn, New York City, the entire film mostly takes place during nighttime, and it makes it feel unpleasant, like with all this dark stuff going around, like almost like setting the tone of what's like, that almost feels like the 1990s with all the graffiti on buildings and stuff people do around, like play bowling or watch movies outside, and yeah. So its atmosphere is the highlight of the film, which I admire, and the soundtrack really creates the mood of the entire picture, with only one that sticks out like a sore thumb, and which leads me to the humor, which for the most part is very excellent as well. Like, it doesn't highlight the Turtles' history in a mocking way like Spider-Verse does, but instead there's like pop culture references which did get some nice laughs, like how these turtles are mentioned as little Shreks, and there's some Nickelodeon cameos stuff, like there's a brief SpongeBob SquarePants, and along with product placement that may seem commercial, but it doesn't hurt this film at all. Pizza Hut is the prominent example. Now, my only issue with this is with the flashbacks. Like, out of the three, there was one that stood out for not being like where it has a gross out scene, but it also plays a song that is really ill-fitting to that particular scene, which you'll have to go to. And personally, it might feel like the worst musical sins I've ever witnessed, since the song at last played in The Nut Job 2 Nutty by Nature. So that's just a minor nitpick. But overall, the story and its execution has excellent pacing, along with the soundtrack that really sets the gritty New York atmosphere, and that's something that can be appreciated. Now on to the animation. Before I talk about the obvious inspiration, I want you to know this little fact. Like, did you know that this film is directed by co-director of Sony's The Mitchells vs. the Machines, Jeff Rowe, and his touch to this film is really distinctive. Like compared to Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse, where they tried to make the visuals make it feel like a living graphic novel, or if DreamWorks, the bad guys, or Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, make things like a living illustration of a storybook. Rowe created visuals to make this look like a living sketchbook drawing. Buildings or the characters and the setting, it's quite distinctive. While New York may be just your normal city, its 1990s aesthetic, like with all the garbage and graffiti all over the place, as well as the underground sewers where Turtles and our father lives, they're really set the gritty tone more than ever perfectly. The character designs, I believe their intent is like to make this film look ugly, but in a good way. Well, it's not just the humans, but also like turtles, which are considered reptiles, but there are also insects and wild animals for this, and it really makes the aesthetic feel all the more incredible. While this is another Spider-Verse inspired film, the visuals really pop out. Now for the characters. As a newcomer to the franchise, I didn't watch either the show or the other movies to know the essentials, but this movie on its own can really stand well. First, let's talk about the main four. Leo, who wears the blue mask, is the leader of the group who wants to help out his brothers to fit into society, even though it's against their father's wishes. There's the orange mask, Mike or Michelangelo, who's like almost close to being one of the most popular. As for Raph, he's like one with the most unstoppable rage that he wants to unleash whenever he gets into the action. The youngest member, Donnie, he may feel like a nerdy turtle, but he wants to do like big things. Yeah, there's a lot of characters that appear, but I'll talk about the important ones. Now that's their father, Splinter, who has a tragic backstory and a flaw of during his experience with the world above, and wants to keep his brothers of turtles safe so they don't get ridiculed. And for the villain, Superfly, man, he's such an intimidating villain. While he may seem like a fly, that ooze made created by a mad scientist and made him grow, he's really villainous, and that's what makes him cool, along with a awesome performance by rapper Ice Cube. For the others, while they might not have much in this film other than being like former goons, the celebrity cameos are true highlights that make the experience all the more worthwhile. And boy, are they packed. You've got, of course, Seth Rogen, but there's also Post Malone, Annabelle Buress, Rose Byrne, and of course, John Cena. But for the other villains, there wasn't much to talk about, as they show little contribution to this film. But yeah, not much to say. But overall, the characters presented in this film really make the experience all the more amazing. And they not only deliver like the action, like with all the fight scenes, but also carry the heart of the film, like how it's supposed to be represented. Man, what can I say about this film? I believe this is what we've been waiting for it to be, the next Spider-Verse, as it can stand well on its own while being inspired by a film. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem is one of the biggest surprises I've ever watched, even as a non-fan of the franchise. The story is really well timed, along with its gritty atmosphere, along with the animation that can stand out while feeling inspired, as well as the characters showing off amazing skills. You should go watch this. I guarantee it'll be the best thing you've ever watched. After the last few months of seeing through Pixar's Elemental and DreamWorks' Revealment, which are enjoyable on their own, but don't reach the ranks of Across the Spider-Verse, this film might bring back your interest in more awesome animation. The most controversial thing I'm going to do this film is give this a 9 out of 10 for being an amazing film. But not just that. But I also prefer this over Across the Spider-Verse. But I have a good reason. While both films get 9 out of 10 on their own, Across the Spider-Verse felt a bit anticlimactic, while Mutant Mayhem feel complete in its executed story. That's just my opinion. Well, join me in late September, and I'll be coming back with the movie I've been anticipating for, Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie. This is going to be the most controversial review I've ever done since reviewing its predecessor, but I don't care. I just couldn't wait for this film to come. So stay tuned.